at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions. The way we're going to try to do it so we keep some sanity with it is come up to the mic and give your name and address for us. And if you can ask your question directly to one of us up here, it will help us all so that you're not getting 3 or 4 of us trying to answer you. And we'll do the best we can as we go along.
I have 2 questions. And first, ma'am, I'm sorry, I can't remember my own name, never mind. But you said that you were having difficulty getting responses with your initial approach to the 25 households. If you don't get a sampling of 25, will you continue expanding the search area until you have a base of 25?
Oh, yes, yes. So we're making calls now to those that didn't respond. We're trying to reach out by phone. And again, if we don't get a response, we'll just go to a nearby home. And
so you won't
we're
reduce
not
the
gonna
sample?
hold. Oh, no,
No.
no.
Okay. That's reassuring.
Yeah.
And Colonel, a question for you, please. When you were talking about the foam that's replaced the old foam, did I hear you say the new foam is safe or safer?
Safer.
Safer.
So,
That
yeah.
was my fear. I worked in healthcare for over 40 years. And back in the wonderful old days when pharmaceutical salesmen would provide lavish buffets to physicians' offices, and clipboards and pens and all kinds of perks. If I had to borrow a pen, invariably one of the secretaries would take out a plastic bag with 200 pens in it. 85% of them, I'm guessing, was from pharmaceuticals that had been discontinued, taken off the market, proved to, going to kill your liver if you take another one of these pills. So when I hear you say safer, it makes me feel very uncomfortable. Can you reassure us that the new firefighting foam isn't going to have a different but still adverse effect on the Barnes Aquifer? I know how important that Barnes Air Force, the Air Force Base is. It's a huge economic driver for the city, and it's reassuring to those of us who feel passionate about the military. But if there's something in the new foam that's going to harm the aquifer in a slightly different way, that's very frightening. So what can you say to reassure us that that will not happen?
Well, like I said, the new foam does have PFCs. Okay? It has a smaller amount of PFCs, and it has a different type of PFC, which is designed to be safer for the environment and safer for humans. So, again, they have not designed a firefighting foam that will fight a jet fuel fire that does not have some type of PFC in there. So, like I said, specifically, it's a safer foam, but I have to be open and honest, it still has PFCs in the foam. Like I said, our big change at Barnes is that we don't train with the foam anymore. We treat it differently than we treated it in the past. In the past, it wasn't treated as a hazardous compound. Now we treat it differently. We don't discharge it unless there's an emergency, and we track it much more closely. So that's what we're doing.
If I might actually follow up on that, also, Colonel, the treatment systems we're putting in will remove this. To take it well below levels and maybe eliminate it completely. We put the treatment on Shaker Road because of the EDD contamination, and we see no EDD in the water at all. And we're going to be doing treatment probably at wells 1 and 2 also. We're exploring that. So we're going to be removing this.
Henry Bartol, Westfield, Mass. I have 5 questions here for DEP. I've got a lot of maps here also to present to them. And one of them is there any airport commissioner members here today? Apparently not. Well,
The manager of the airport is here. Just so you know, yeah.
Airport commissioners, wondering if any of them are here. And I was wondering if they have addressed this aquifer water problem in their meetings now, and have they ever addressed the old hangar floor drains? The old hangar had some floor drains where depositing a lot of contaminants, and that was never solved. Now, the air guard storage property across the main runway east, have they ever dumped any refuse over the bank at the site? And have they sent in trucks to remove trash from that site a number of years ago? Because a friend of mine saw a lot of trucks come out of there many years ago, and a very young friend of mine, and I was wondering if the air master guy trucks that were removing rubbish they dumped over the bank at that other spot. Now, have any soil samples been taken at the site above city wells 7 and 8 and analyzed for contaminants at this point? That's another question I have. And question 4, is wells 1 and 2 downstream of Holyoke Road offline? And is the gravel pit east of wells number 1 within the depth requirements in city ordinances? There's one massive gravel pit here, it is just above our wells number 1. And is well number 2 online? Now, I also have here a lot of maps for DEP and a website for the Westfield and Farmington Rivers Act website. They're all here for DEP, wherever DEP is. And
Yeah, Henry, well 1 and 2. Well 1's is online, well 2 is the backup. It comes online as needed. I'm over here. Well 1 is online, well 2 serves as a backup, comes on in there. Well 2 is online, well 1's a backup. They're both well below the health advisory.
okay. Now, I was the first person in this city to get the aquifer map. Before it was published, I got 3 of them, and one I gave to the water department. And this is the aquifer map from Boston, and I met the engineer who made the study, and it was presented before the city council a number of years ago, and it went over the heads.
Good evening, my name is Jeff Lee, I live on Ridgeville Road. Question for Dave. You mentioned that well 7 and 8 were closed, shut down.
Yeah.
But the wells did not test positive for the PFCs. Why were well 7 and 8 shut down?
They did test, they were above the health advisory. They were taken offline before that came out though. So well 7 and 8 are above the health advisory, that's why they're not online.
Okay, so they did test positive.
Yes.
And that's why you're pursuing treatment?
Yes.
Okay. The next question would be for either DEP or the base. If private wells are affected by this chemical, what is the responsibility for DEP? Because right now I know you don't regulate private wells, but in this case you're going above and beyond what your requirements are for the state. I think you're stepping in where you're really not required to, but I think you feel the need to. And so what is the responsibility in the instance that some private wells test positive, or if they test hot and above the regulation of 70 parts per trillion, either to the base or to DEP? What happens when these things come up hot if they do?
Well, as Eva said, this is part of the emerging contaminants that we're looking at. And in the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup, we do have the ability to do investigations to find out where any contamination is coming from. So that's part of our role here. The other part is the interest in these private wells. And we don't govern private wells individually. When there's a widespread problem like there may be here, we're going to investigate, find out whether people on private wells are above that health advisory or not. And if they are, we'll provide bottled water to them, short term, and in the long term provide treatment to those wells. Not long term, mid-term, I guess. Long term is we'll look for other solutions which might be designed for the city system if possible.
So how do you provide treatment to individual wells? Do you have a treatment facility in each house?
They're basically carbon units that go into the intake of the home, and they're It's just carbon, very effective at treating PFCs.
And those would be different or more sophisticated than the ones you can buy at Home Depot?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Much more.
Yeah, and they would be designed for that individual well.
Yeah. So just to assure people, the reason I'm asking these questions is that so that people don't panic and think this is the crisis like Flint, Michigan. That it's not anything that isn't solvable. And the DEP and the basin and the city is taking all the precautions and the things that they need to in order to make sure that this is not a problem, number one, that it's solved relatively easily.
Well said.
Further questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, yep.
Hi, I'm Rick Knitzky, I live in Fowler Road. It seems like a lot of the emphasis of the testing has been in the area around the airport, but this problem has existed for 50 years or something like that. And a large amount of that water leads through 20-inch water mains and goes everywhere in the city. Where I happen to live, we have a combination of some people on public water and some people have wells. I'm in an agricultural area where I have a septic tank, it doesn't go into the sewer, and a lot of the water is used for agricultural purposes as well. So there's a lot of water being put into the ground. Has anybody crunched any numbers to figure out how much of this contaminant has made it to the areas where we're not testing? And are those numbers reflecting that there's absolutely no problem? Or could there be something to worry about, and should testing be done farther out away from the center of the city?
I would say that the testing we do is at the source, and none of the sources are above the advisories. The system, the way the Westfield water system works, there's 4 water tanks, there's 8 wells, and there's the reservoir, and it's actually a blended system. It's all mixed together. But the highest concentration is going to be right where we test it. It's not going to be anyplace else in the city because we know it's not coming out of the other well, and we know it's not coming out of the reservoir. So it's very dilute by the time it gets out of
The
the reservoir.
reservoir water is clean, right? Because I'm screwed at the top of the water.
The reservoir water goes through a water treatment plant.
Okay, and that's coming from a totally uncontaminated area, right?
Yeah, surface water.
I'm good, everybody else has to work. So there's no fear that the contaminants have been moved out of the area where all of the testing is being done, is basically my question.
So as part of the initial testing that we did for these compounds, as part of UCLR3, which is just what EPA called that round of testing, when they first became concerned about these particular compounds, we didn't just test wells 7 and 8, 1 and 2, we also tested all the other wells in the system and the reservoir water. And we didn't find these compounds in any of those other areas. So as of 2013, when we tested them,
Okay.
they weren't
Now,
there.
I assume that when you say you didn't find it, there's still some detectable amount, if not zero. I can't imagine something being testing at zero.
Well, these compounds are tested in the parts per trillion range, which is much, much smaller than most of the other compounds that we
Sure.
test for. And I would have to double check, but I believe that the other sources were non-detect, which means we
Okay.
couldn't detect any
Right.
amount.
So
I have
over
to double
50
check.
years, it's anything that has made it into the soil outside of the area of interest has dispersed faster than it has been put in, and there's no worry about buildup, so that the wells that are in my neighborhood are not contaminated. I'm pretty sure.
Well, speaking to the wells, so like I mentioned, these can persist and travel, which is why, the next phase might include expanding where we're looking at now.
Okay.
So we're looking at the closest areas now, and we're not sure what we're going to find. We would expand that till we reach the limits.
Okay. There is a 20-inch water main in my yard, normally it flows in a good direction, but not always. So that's bringing possibly contaminated water into my neighborhood, and about half the people on my street have public water, and about half have a well. So there's the question, I guess, is there any chance that the soil is contaminated in areas outside of where you're looking? And it seems like he's saying, has anybody done a number crunching to figure out if, no?
No, but like I said, we are, we will be expanding that if needed.
Okay, thank you.
John Holland, Westfield, Mass. You said that well 7 and 8 were closed before the PFCs were detected. Why were they closed?
Well, 7 and 8 were closed before the EPA reduced, or issued, their health advisory limits. So the testing was done in 2013, and some amount of the PFCs were detected at that time, but at that time, the EPA didn't have this 70 parts per trillion health advisory. The guidance that they had was much, much higher. So as soon as the city found out that EPA was re-examining their limits, we re-examined our test results. And when we did that, we found that the wells 7 and 8 should be taken offline because they might be over the new recommended limit that was going to be coming.
Thank you.
Robert Pearson. I'd like to know, is there any DDT in these wells? Because when I worked on tobacco in the 50s, they used to spray it when we were under the nest. Is there any DDTs in the wells?
No, we've tested for that. I think I mentioned that earlier. That's why there's a treatment plant on Shaker Road for wells. Still with that.
Because up at the airport, that was American Sumatra tobacco. We have tobacco fields all over Westfield, and they all use DDT. That's what I want to know. Another, I would like to know why Montgomery Reservoir is not being used.
Okay. I know this came up in a council meeting. Montgomery Reservoir was taken offline well over 40 years ago because of color and odor problems. To put it back online would probably cost $10 million in 10 years for a 1 million gallon source.
Yes,
that would have been dried up the middle of last summer. We can get much more out of that than out of 6 of 8 of our wells. So there's no, you have to build treatment plant. The pipe that runs down from Montgomery Reservoir is from 1874. It wouldn't make economic sense to put it back on, and it wouldn't really add anything to the system.
Because Westfield had one of the best drinking water in the whole country. That's all I want to say.
Good evening, Scott Cady, 137 Northwest Road. I have a question for the DEP. If you have people with wells and you're going to be testing their water, what is the cost of that test?
About $300 per sample.
$500. And what's the treatment process if they do find themselves contaminated? What will you do?
Yeah, we would put in carbon filters.
How big are those carbon filters? Are we talking
There are
columns
dual-
that are
yeah,
just all? Are we
dual
talking
columns
10-inch
that are
cartridges?
Dual columns with cartridges.
Question over here. In regards to your pilot study, who's the engineering firm that's doing the pilot study? I'm kind of curious.
Well, CDM is the one who took the sample, and it's out at the University in Washington. There's only labs that can do this testing right now. So Camp Preston is the engineering firm.
Will those results be public?
Yes.
And when do you expect those results to come back?
As Dave mentioned earlier, we expect to be seeing some sort of results from the pilot test within the next month.
Okay. When you're anticipating using, what, activated carbon for your treatment?
Yes.
And when are you going to dispose of that carbon, or are you going to regenerate on site with steam?
We're exploring the different options for whether, what type of carbon to be used, and the type of carbon is going to dictate whether it can be regenerated or whether it can't be, and those are all things that we will be able to look at more clearly when we have the results of that pilot study, but we're looking at all of the options at this point.
Okay, one last question. The breakthrough, how much breakthrough do you anticipate of the product coming through carbon?
Breakthrough of,
How much of the contaminant will get by the carbon?
that's part of what we're looking at in the pilot study, and so we won't know that information until we have the results of that pilot study.
Is there another group around here that you can actually go out and see how well they're doing?
Yeah, we've actually done that.
We just recently went up and saw a plant that's online in Vermont.
We've been in contact with the Cape also, who has the same situation.
And how successful have they been?
Well, I think they're doing pretty well, but they didn't do the bin scale testing, so I think they had a little bit of problem with some of their filters clogging.
I have a question, maybe it's the elephant in the room here. We're talking this advisory level. Is it by law we have to make these changes?
Maybe the DEP might want to.
Well, when there's data out there that shows there may be a health impact, then we are obligated to act on it.
Okay, it says, but there's nothing by law says you absolutely got to do this.
Oh, I think we have, our regulations state if there is a contaminant that can pose a health impact, then we do have to act on it. And those responsible for it do have to take action.
And I
So
see.
yes, I would say that there are, our regulations are clear on it.
How long does it take to get the test back? Because if these people are going out and having their wells tested, and they come back and you find it's contaminant, how often are you going to have them require them to test it? And will it be at your cost or their cost?
Well, currently, we are prepared to pay for this, the testing and installing the system. Long-term, again, that will be discussed later with the city and the bar in terms of long-term solutions.
So these hapless homeowners could end up with a huge bill at some point by testing. How often would you test? Yearly, monthly, make sure the carbon's working? I'm just asking these questions because there's a lot of people with wells.
I just told you we are prepared to pay for the testing.
Okay, hopefully we get that in writing, right? Thank you.
Kristen Mello, Mosley Avenue. My first question is for the Colonel. Is there a plan to develop a reclamation for any discharge that you may need? I completely understand that there is no other way to put out a jet fuel fire. Is there a plan in place to the runways mostly impervious and to reclaim any spent foam, this new foam that you're using now?
I'm not sure of the answer to that, John, as you know, fire department. Let me check with my fire department on base and see what their plan is if they do discharge. I don't know of any right now, but there may be one, so let me check with them.
If not, I'd like to request that that happen, please.
Okay.
And for anybody who can answer, I appreciate, first of all, this meeting and you guys coming and speaking with us and being so patient with our questions. I also appreciate that the water department took those wells offline as soon as they knew it was going to be a problem. My concern, however, is for the 40 or so years that I was drinking water that came out of wells 7 and 8 before they were turned off. And I know that we don't have the data to support whether or not the water that was distributed throughout the city had it in there. But I'm wondering whether or not there's a way to model the plume now that would let us back model what happened, or are the people assembled here willing to support the idea of serum testing? It's not a trick question.
Well, that's not really for me to say, but as far as the plume, I mean, the bird says they really haven't used this in 30 years. And wells 1 and 2 are, which you think of as a plume, it would move in that direction. Wells 1 and 2 are still well below any advisory limit.
No, if I could, just to say, one of the things that I think we've been consistent on, that everyone has said, we're still in the stage of identifying the scope of this. So we're using all our time and resources to identify this and to get the fix, whether it be through DEP or through the city. So we're not trying to not answer your question. That isn't something, it doesn't mean it isn't something that would be looked at later. It's certainly not something that we're even close to being able to address at this point.
Right, I would just like to submit to you guys that if in 2013 and 2015 the levels of these contaminants were found so much higher than what the current advisory has become, that in 2012, 2011, and 2010, they probably were also above the lifetime advisory. And so I would just like to submit that while I am grateful that the water coming out of our taps is not over the limit today, and that the waters in wells 1 and 2 are not over the limit today, I would like us to not forget that for the last 4 years, at least for me, I was drinking water we could not test.
Well, but again, the levels haven't changed. They didn't change significantly from 2013 to 2016 when we started testing.
Right, which means it was probably pretty high and
Well, once again, those wells 1 and 2 are well under the limit. And there's conflict within the EPA what these limits even should be. I understand your concern, but again, wells 1 and 2, if they haven't changed in 3 years, may not have changed in 40 years, and they're under any advisory limit.
correct. But I've been told that wells 7 and 8 were very high throughput wells when they were online. And it is my opinion that it is most likely that those numbers were not low in the years preceding our ability to test.
They may not have been, but let me remind you, as we came up earlier, this is a blended system.
Right.
We'll continue to work.
Right, and I know that you can't change history. I just like, I'm grateful that we don't need to be concerned with what's coming out of today's tap if we're not on private wells, sorry to everybody else. But the concern for historical and current blood serum levels is real, and I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
But I think the answer to that, though, they don't have much data on the levels in people's blood, but some they do have show it's dropping. The compound is dropping because it was in so many things years ago that it's not in anymore.
So ours should be too.
It should be. We don't, unfortunately, we don't have a baseline. So when we test people, we don't know what that means.
Right.
But I don't want people to panic about these things, so.
But no, that damage is already done. I'm just hoping that we can find out what that is.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carolyn Nash, Stewart Drive, in Westfield. We have a well, and I checked to see if we could have it tested. I called the town hall, and they said, no, we're not doing private wells. I checked with Spectrum Analytical in Wagon, they said they can do it with PFOS, A's and PFOS. They said it's $500. Is the EPA going to pay for it, or is the town hall going to pay for it?
Well, I think she said, there's a schematic drawing, and I think if you didn't see it on the thing, they can show you after, but DEP is paying for the testing of the private wells.
We're right outside of
Well, you'll see if
the line.
I think, if I can say it, if they're doing the testing on the 25, and if they see where they need to do an expanded.
I don't want to wait and see that. I would like to have my well tested now. For the $500, I'll pay for it if it doesn't have any contaminants in it. But if it does have contaminants, can I send them the bill? Can I send the bill? Who's going to take care of that?
I'm not at liberty to say that. I think, go ahead, you're better at this than I am.
No, we have received a number of calls from folks like you who might be outside that area or ones that we haven't chosen yet. We are taking down everyone's information that's calling, so make sure you talk to us afterwards. Give us your name and address. We do keep track of everyone that's requesting to have their well tested. Not that we can promise that we'll do that, but we will consider it if we're expanding our testing. And certainly, like you've already made efforts to see what it would cost to do it on your own. If people can't wait, we do encourage them to do that. And if you do find something, we ask that you share those results with us. I can't pay your bill, but share those results with us because it will add information to what we're looking for.
Okay, so I will do it on my own and get time.
Maybe you want to go through the DEP. Can I ask you a question, even I didn't put you on the spot, but maybe you mentioned that some people haven't returned their information and you will still get to that 25 area. If somebody like her was in that area,
Yeah, so it's.
so if you get her the information, maybe you'll move up to the
Okay.
top of the list of the substitutes.
If someone is interested and we need a sample in that area, we would certainly take that.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And the gentleman back here.
Thank you very much. My name is Ray Labar. I live on Buck Pond Road. I'm 7/10 of a mile due east of the north end of the runway. Am I in the zone? Does anybody know what well feeds my home? Where I'm getting my water from? It's Buck Pond Road. It's 7/10 of a mile due east of the north end of the runway.
You would get the, again, it's a blended system, but you're closest to wells 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Yeah.
Okay. My other question is, how often do you test the PFOA and CFOS?
We've only started testing for it, so we aren't required to test, but we test so that we can do that, so we can come up with a solution and come up with some kind of treatment plan. We test the water weekly, so we don't necessarily test it weekly. There's not that many labs that can do it.
Like every 6 months, a year?
Yeah, I think that's the schedule we agreed to.
Now, where can I get the results of those tests?
The results of some of the PSC testing that the city has done are posted on the city website. You go to the citywestfield.org website.
I did, right. And the last one I saw was from 2015. It didn't have the PFOA or CFOS.
There's a specific PFC concern menu off to the left on the Public Works site. If you under Public Works Water, just so that I make sure that I'm telling you exactly the right thing. On the left-hand side, there's a menu that has a series of things. At the bottom, it says PFC's information and updates. If you click on that link, a whole series of documents comes up, including the UCMR3 results from 2013, the PSC sampling results from June of last year and September of last year, and a lot of other information, like the most recent water restriction and things like that. So I recommend that anyone who's interested take a look at the information about this.
Will well 1 be treated? Will it be under consideration under a carbon
Yeah,
treatment?
yeah, we're already moving forward with that.
Okay, and you're looking at what, 90% removal?
Well,
it's kind of low.
I don't know if we have those answers, but it would get us to safe level at a minimum. So.
What was the highest level that you recorded that you know of for PFOA, PFOS and mine?
On well 1?
Yeah, 1 and 2.
I don't have it broken out by well, but the highest result for PFOA on wells 1 and 2, I have the results aggregated. The highest result for PFOA last year was 8.5 and PFOS was 25. Those were the highest levels detected. And that health advisory limit is 70. So,
Oh, okay. All right, so that's 25 parts per trillion.
yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
Thank you.
I want to thank you for that. That was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Very clear. Thank you.
Hi, Joan Carell from Westfield. I have a question for John Richardson. If you remember, I think it was 1997 or so, there was a citizens committee at the Guard because it was contamination. And I think there were 4 wells that were contaminated. I think those were test wells. Were those for the same things we're talking about today? Was that another kind of contamination?
No, it's not type of contamination, it was basically hydrocarbon and chlorinated solvents that we were looking at. We weren't looking at this type of contamination as it wasn't basically on the list, so.
Okay, because they're using the biospark or something like that.
Right, that was for basically oil, number 2 fuel oil that's spilled in the ground.
Okay, so that wasn't the same thing.
Right.
Thank you.
That was the removal of those tanks, Jim, back in the day.
Yes. Thank you.
Bonnie Adams, 354 Root Road. When you're testing the 25 wells for the PFOAs, are you also going to be testing for other contaminants?
The testing will be limited to the perfluorinated compounds that are in the method. So there are many perfluorinated compounds, and we'll be looking at the whole suite of them. But not other contaminants, no, not other parameters.
So if there were other contaminants in the water, they would go undetected?
Well, like it was mentioned earlier, we don't regulate private wells and look at, the quality of that. We have an issue here where we know a potential contaminant that's maybe in the aquifer, and our lawyers step in and look and see if it's there.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you again for coming out and addressing this important issue, because again, many of us that you can say, my name is Gail Bean, and I've been a resident of Westfield, Massachusetts most of my life. I'm a registered nurse. And I listened to the information. I know we don't want to want. I'm trying to understand, like, okay. So, the phone was used from 1970 to 1987, and we stopped using it. The problem goes away, but not really. Because the foam goes through our soil and filters and gets down into the water. I come back to Westfield in 1979, have 3 children. I live right in that area. I drink the water morning, noon, and night. I not only live on Sherwood Avenue, but I work at Westfield Mass Hospital, so I drink the water 24/7. I know people very near and dear to my heart who have died of things, okay? And when I worked in the hospital, they'd say, don't drink the water. Yeah, drink the water. So yes, everything went away in 1987. The chemical went down to the aquifer, continued to be in the aquifer. Just because the foam wasn't being used, the chemical's there. So, from 79 to today, until they turned off the wells in 2013, we continued to drink the water. We don't know what the levels were. They were high enough to turn them off, the wells. So, I don't know how much I have been exposed to. Now, again, I use Teflon pans and all those other things that we all get exposed to. So, I'm not just a regular everyday citizen that lived somewhere who wasn't drinking the water. I got it from all angles, okay, as most of the people in my area did likewise. I'm simply asking, there is a blood test. Why can't the few of us that were in that area that have this concern, who maybe you do some kind of a little checklist that says you've got to meet all these criteria before you can have your blood test. You have to have been drinking it 24/7, you worked in the area, you lived in the area so many years. And start getting some answers as to what the level is. Because being a nurse, I guess I know too much. I'm just concerned. I want to know what my blood level is. Because once I know what it is, I'll see if it's going down. Thank you. That would be great, okay? At least I have a baseline of where I'm starting. Right now, I have no information. I don't know how much is in my system. Could be nothing. Luckily, right now, I don't have any major health issues. But I know people that have, okay? That is my one request. We have to go forward, okay? Let's do something and be proactive. My next thing is, God bless the aquifer, if we don't contaminate anymore. There. What is the city doing? The city planner, the developer, all the individuals who see it as an old mine up there. What are we doing to responsibly look at how much we can do up there before we have another issue of contamination that we're going to be facing? We have development in one area of homes that someone got to build. They want to build a power plant, they were going to do that. They wanted to put bottling. It's like, is there a plan here of responsibly citing things so that we are reasonably looking at that aquifer? I went to the Barnes Commission, and one gentleman was like, oh, we have to start looking about all the land around the airport, because you don't going to get it so that we can start building. I'm like, building? Do we even know what we're doing? And I know we have boards that prevent things from going where they're supposed to. They're trying the best they can. But there's got to be a bigger plan here that's responsibly citing things with us as the citizens being the people that we care about, not just businesses. So thank you very much. Whatever you can do for that, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bill Lee, Westfield. This gentleman right here, I have a couple questions for you. The presentation that you made was very nice, by the way. Is that going to be accessible to us?
Sure, we can yeah.
During the presentation, you mentioned that you got some of the information about the private wells from well companies. Is there a log of that?
There's a state well drillers database that's on our website. And anytime a well is drilled, that information has to go into the log. So there is a database.
Okay. And how far back does that database go?
It doesn't go back, decades. I think, was it the 90s? Yeah, which we knew that wasn't a perfect system for finding all the wells, which is why we also work with the city to access their records and assessment records.
Well, it was interesting. I called the health department and spoke to a very nice young lady there. She's really helpful, but she told me that their records only go back to 2011, correct?
No, we have some that are older than that, but it's very scattered. The bottom line to that whole thing is that whenever a well is installed legally, a well completion report has to go to the state DEP. So that's where
So there's a different database that you don't have access to?
No, we don't have a database. We have a paper system.
Yeah.
Because that's the way that it is in the city right now. We don't have the database software to log that. We do have files on all of the well applications that we've gotten, and we license the installation. So then after that, once the licensed well driller gets done with the project, well completion report goes to DEP.
Okay.
How far back that has been, it's always, as far as my experience in the city for 20 years, has been a practice. What happened before that, I don't know.
Okay.
But the way we close that gap is that we access the assessor's records and also, got to see who paid water bills. So we know where the homes are.
Right.
And we know if they pay a water bill. If they're not paying water bills, then the assumption is that they're
Right, they're not off the grid.
Whether they're in the database or not, we assume they're involved there.
It's just that when I only saw it very briefly, so I could be incorrect, but I noticed that there were homes, and I know there were on wells that weren't listed there. So.
Yeah, so the last slide had the 25 that we chose, but a couple slides before that, we had 150
Right.
that were in yellow. So, you can see that.
Okay, we can get access to that?
I think, we have on our website, we have all the files associated with this project. If you want to come afterwards, I can tell you exactly. And we'll upload this there. All the information we get on the site, any records we put out, we're uploading to the file on this. So there's already a file that's accessible on the web.
Excellent. Thanks for meeting today.
I got one more question.
Sure. Then,
Has anybody ever thought about how in Germantown, Maryland, national standards and safety? My son-in-law is the head fire protection engineer for the government. And he was down in Mobile, Alabama for years, testing different kinds of foam on Navy aircraft. Maybe we could call up NIST, and they could come and look at it. I don't know if that's possible. Did you ever hear of this?
what do you want us to look at? What do you, I don't know.
Well, call up Germantown, the federal government, NIST, National Standards and Safety. They have all the rules and regulations of everything. And you can call them, and maybe they can help you out.
Shannon White, Woodford Drive here in Westfield. So actually, the question is to you, because the confusion has always been around well too. You know, the letter that came out in September 2016, of course, we're on bottled water, because we have smaller children, and it made it seem like that's what should happen. But now you're saying that the levels, is it because level, so like if you test one separately from two, they have different results, but they actually flow together? That's my first question. And then my second question was that idea that when there's a drought, do those levels tend to change? Because that idea that like well 2 was off, but it could be turned on in critical need. And so that idea that like we didn't know when it was going to be turned back on was concerning. Could you just speak to that? Because I tried to look through documents and I wasn't seeing any changes that I could find.
So we sent out a letter back in September of 2016 based on some preliminary results that we had on testing at wells 1 and 2. The testing indicated that we might be over on well 2. We immediately had more tests done, and when that information came in, we were able to look at all of the data, and what we found is that some other compounds that are not on that health advisory were incorrectly added in together. So there was no result from well 2 or well 1 that was ever above that 70 parts per trillion. Okay. And what the letter that came out said was that that in an emergency we need to run both of the wells. Since the results came back and both wells are below, that's not really an issue. But the reason we're running one primarily or we're running well 2 primarily and well 1 as an emergency backup is we're looking at the trends in them and just trying to manage them the best and most effective way that we can to meet the needs of the city. And they're both under the limits, they're both safe. So.
Okay, and that was where the confusion. I may have missed the report for the next letter. It's fine. But level 2 is the high one, so that other compound that mixed with it is not a concern. Yeah.
So what we're going on is the EPA health advisory limit, which is only based on PFOA and PFOS.
Yeah.
So there are a host of other perfluorinated compounds that you can do tests for. We don't have any recommendations on those at this point. Okay. So based on the PFOA and PFOS, we're well below that 70.
Okay. Thank you.
Using my hearing and I'm delayed. Colonel, the safer firefighting foam, how is that delivered? Is it stored as a liquid and then mixed with something to be sprayed as a foam? Does anyone know?
Right, it's, the replacement foam came in 300-gallon totes.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
The replacement foam came in like 300-gallon totes, and those totes go into 3 fire engines, and it's in a liquid form, mixed with water at 3%. And that's what's stored.
Can you explain how it's stored up there? I know that fuel has to be stored in a double bladder plate.
Right. Well, it's in the fire trucks. It's not. We don't have any really much stock. We have some 5-gallon beer, cans of it, plastic cans, but we store that inside out of the elements in secondary containment. And the majority of it's sitting in the fire trucks. Fire trucks sit inside, so this stuff doesn't get into the environment.
Okay, but there's no alarm system on them if one of them started leaking or anything like that?
Our fire department's manned 24/7 because of our alert mission. So I have people at the trucks literally 24/7 because we're on alert 24/7 with our airplanes. And to follow up on the question earlier about, if we did have a fire or a fuel spill and we used the foam for what it was intended for, luckily that's very, very rare. We don't have a lot of aircraft mishaps that require us to use the foam. Not every firefighting truck on base has foam in it. Some have water in them. So again, it would only be used specifically for the type of emergency that would be needed for. That type of emergency, an aircraft mishap, would immediately launch an aircraft mishap investigation, which would involve gathering all the liquids from the aircraft mishap and getting a 1 for safety investigation board, and then 2, it would involve remediation and putting the site back to the way it was originally. So, it's going to be in the trucks, which are manned 24/7. It's only going to be used in an emergency. And then if it is used, we're going to have an entire 30-day process of a safety investigation board that's going to capture all that, first investigate and then clean up afterwards.
I did notice a short notice in the Westfield newspaper not long ago that there was a firefighting exercise at the guard base, and my antenna went up, and so I just, I need constant reassurance.
Yeah, no, we're not using the phone for any training at all on the base.
I remember that you said that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Good evening, I'm John Henderson, I live on Marble Circle. I just have a question on if I have a filtration system for the house. You guys have specifications or part numbers of the proper filter to put in that system so we can be proactive?
Well, if we need to install treatment, part of it will be almost similar to what the city's doing, where a test on the water quality for that specific well will be looked at, and then the carbon will be sized, and designed for that water. They'll look at hardness, they'll look at other compounds that may be in there. And so, not knowing, I think these carbon units are very effective, but you have to look at the water quality you have. So we don't have a standard, here's the one that we necessarily use on every single.
So I'm on city water now. So how would you'd have to sample my water and then you can tell me the particular type of filter I would need?
I don't know if you have any input on that. I mean, I don't have the city water parameters. I know in terms of if we needed to put one in, our contractors would look at that, those characteristics of the water and design. The carbon manufacturer and the manufacturer of these systems would be the one to tell you what sort of system to put in for your water.
My best course of action is have somebody test my water. I want to be proactive and just put a filter in regardless. And then hopefully all this stuff gets fixed. So I should have somebody test my water and then they can specify.
Right, what kind of carbon and what kind of filter you should put in, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions?
Any future surprise, work for your city councilor? I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and DP for coming out and answering some questions. I just had a couple of questions, because you said you had a database with a whole file for everything that's going on. Do you have in that file information regarding who's getting letters? Because there's been quite some confusion with the public about who's getting letters and who can get bottled water. And I don't live in the area, my ward's not in the area, but I have constituents that are concerned with it and haven't contacted me.
Okay.
So is that information there?
Yeah, sometimes, we didn't upload everyone we sent letters to. When we get the paperwork back from them and it's signed, then we would upload some of that information on the website. We are respectful of people's privacy as well, so that has to be taken into account. But we have gotten a number of calls from people, whether, having questions about whether we've chosen a well, whether we tested a well. So if your constituents have questions, they certainly call us, and we can help answer.
And so the other question I had, you were saying that if private wells do test for these levels that are prohibitive, there will be installation of a carbon system in the short term as well as bottled water, and then in the long term possibly tapping into the city system. And I'm just wondering where the cost and who's going to foot the bill for that. Is it going to be on the residents or is it going to be on the taxpayers?
Well, in the short term, we're going to cover the cost of bottled water and the carbon system. We have to take that next week.
All right. Can that be something we kept up to date on? Council would certainly love to know where that money's coming from. Thank you.
John Jones, 354 Root Road. My first question would be for the water department. What were the levels of those PFOAs in 2013? What were they? Were they 500? Were they 200? 190?
No, they were, I think back then the...
Do you have that you have that recorded somewhere?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's posted on the website.
But now this is well 7 and 8. Are they closed?
Well, 7 and 8 have been closed since December 2015.
I believe to limit the advisory was 600, and they were under 600 back then. They dropped the advisory.
So they were 600, but that was the rule then.
600 was the advisory limit, they were under 600.
We don't know exactly, when you say under, was it 300, 400, 599?
You do have that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, it's a 45-page document. And I
Sure.
can follow up with you or wait.
Remember we
Right,
started,
I have
they
another
were
question.
around 400.
But that is the one you wanted.
Well, I'm surprised somebody didn't ask that question. I was hoping I would hear that question answered. I had our water tested, and again, you're talking about the PFOAs here on it. And I spoke to Environmental Lancaster, and for $350, they tested for 14 of those, all of them. They gave me a package, they sent me how to do it. I did get some help from Mello here, so that I could have someone document that I did it correctly on that. And they sent me back one, we have no detection, none on it. I'm on the Southampton Westfield line, and I'd like to keep it that way. So what I'm looking for from the DEP and from the water is a little future, and from the mayor here, is a prevention so that we don't have more of this, different things here. So do we know what that number is yet?
The highest one that I'm seeing right now is for PFOS, and that was 120.
120, but the limit was 600.
Yeah.
Wow, government, we got a lot of risk. Wow. So when I had that test done, I don't think that everybody is going to be able to run out and do that, because you need someone to help you a little bit. You need one to certify how you're doing this test. Now, you're not going to have the homeowners do those tests. You're having someone go.
No, our contractors are doing.
Yeah, they're gonna go do that.
We are accompanying them and overseeing it.
Yeah, so that's why there would be more money. You're actually having a professional go and do it. Mine was $350, and I had to send it overnight, put ice bags in it, little bottles, temperatures. It was much more complex than I thought it would be. And it was DLL, which is Eurofins, Lancaster Environmental Labs, and it was very prompt, 10 days. Report came through the email. Called them up, spoke to them about it. They discussed all the different aspects of every little thing that was going on. And they told me that we had no detection, but we should test again probably later on as time goes on. They seem somewhat aware of this here. Who's got the hydrology map here that says that the water flows south? Is there some special map that says that, or that's?
We have maps that show it flows south.
I mean, the aquifer I'm talking about.
The aquifer, yeah, flows north to south.
It doesn't go on. It was expressed to me by someone that the water on the surface flows the same way as the aquifer flows. Would you not say that? That would be a reasonable thought?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, on Route Road, Brickyard Brook flows north and goes into the Manhan River on it there. The aquifer, I can go out and dig, and I'm in the aquifer, 5 feet, 54 inches. There's the top of the water table right there.
Well, you're not in the aquifer at 5 feet.
Well, I'm talking about the water,
Yeah.
the propensity to be up there.
And you also don't know when it flows, I mean,
I understand.
water flows downhill, so.
I thought so, but Brickyard Brook's going the other way there. It's not going down.
So and I don't really want to get too far into this, but if the source of where it flows is higher than,
Yeah.
where it's at, it can actually flow a little uphill, but it's going to go back downhill, so.
So no, it flows into the Manhan River. I don't see it flowing uphill like that. So, do we know the exact numbers yet, or?
It was 125.
It was 120.
Oh, it was? Oh, I'm sorry. So 125, and the limit was 600. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anyone else?
My name is Leslie Bissett. I moved on Buck Pond Road in 1979. So like other people said, we've drank more than our share of the water from our shallow well. This gentleman just said at 5 feet, you're not in the aquifer. The shallow well at 20 feet, 13 feet of water in my basement. I'm there.
If it's groundwater, it doesn't mean you're in the aquifer.
All right. That comes as news. I would like to ask the person with the locations of the 1 mile radius from the well and how far that differs from the contamination site, which may put me and Carol in that 1 mile radius. I don't know what that separation is.
If you want to see us after, we can show you the map, and we can show where your house is, and we can talk.
Very good. And the Taiwan people have done tests. We asked them to do it in 2010. We don't know how in depth they did it, but we have the results, and if anybody would want some older data that may help them because you didn't test much for in 2010, I have this results that I could make available to you if you think it would be helpful to look at.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
And I will see you about this map later?
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
Anyone else ask questions?
One final one. In Hoyle, they have a well there in the upper right-hand corner of the map. That well's closed for TCE. That was the material they sprayed on the planes when they burned them? Is that not correct here? I'm going to ask you.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. But that's why that well's closed, though, is because of TCE. Because you're on the BAPAC commission, and it shows that.
I have been on BAPAC for the past 9 months.
Sure.
I don't know the circumstances of the closing of the building well, so I can't.
Well, it says it right on it, closed TCE.
Okay.
All right, that's what they do. That's pretty specific. BAPAC on the advisory commission. They only can advise. They can't enforce anything. They can't, you would have to listen to them to get the information. So, but is that correct, or that's closed for TCE by the airport? Has nothing to do with you?
I don't know anything about that one, sir.
Was that General Electric or something? Some other mass?
Well, I'm not aware.
Is there TCE in wells 87?
Not bad.
Do we test for that?
We test for everything that we're required to test for. I haven't looked at every test result that we've had. If we tested for TCE, then we did not detect TCE in any.
So you don't know if you tested for it? Because that was closed. That's their number 1 well there, right on the borderline there in an area. If you look at the map, same aquifer.
I haven't examined every test result that we've had, so I can't
So
definitively
we've been able to
say.
visit the office to see if you have TCE testing and data on that.
We have PC tested, it was a negative, and we don't.
Oh, okay, that'd be great. That's what I want to know.
Well, I don't know we have it. That's the first I hear of that, and we can't test for, we test for what we're required to test for. We didn't test for this compound years ago, so.
TCE was an inexpensive way where they could go over and burn the planes and then put them out. And as a young child, back when the dinosaurs roamed, I went over and watched them burn the planes. And they put that foam and they put it out, and they did that. But that's a common knowledge thing. I think they had to advise you and several other towns about TCE, contamination in oil. Okay.
Steve Donovan, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for convening this good discussion. 2 quick questions. So, what triggered the DEP's decision to test the private wells?
Well, when the health advisory was lowered, they recognized that Westfield had public water supply above that level. We started to get concerned that there might be private well, people in private wells that had that same contamination in the well, but we never know. So, the option is just to tell people to go out and test it. But we thought, the best thing to do would be for us to go out and start testing representative wells to see how far this contaminant might be flowing away from the area of known contaminants at this point in time.
All right, thank you. Are there any plans to put out an advisory to potentially affected residents, or is that in discussion, or are there any precautions that you're recommending to those with private wells?
Well, I think what we want to do first is find out whether those wells are affected or not, and if they are, to what level they're affected. And as Eva said, when we start doing this, we're going to do it in phases to see if we can capture the extent of this plume, if you will. And that'll dictate anything that happens after that. There are a lot of information on the internet right now, on the web. And the EPA Health Advisory statute cited Weston, right?
Yes, and we'd be in constant communication with those residents about, if it's found and we suspect it to be a problem, not only at that specific residence, but other wells nearby. We would provide data results, help interpret that data, provide fact sheets. We'd be in constant communication in terms of the system that's being designed for their home and how to maintain it. So that would be an ongoing dialogue.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, it's 7:30, we'll take one more question. Save the best till last, I guess.
Mary Ann Babinski, I live on the area of the north side of the town where the 4 wells are located, or 2 that are shut down. I'm also a city councilor in Ward 1, so I've heard gotten many calls, had a lot of concerns expressed to me since this whole thing has happened. So I want you all to breathe a sigh. I'm the last one to ask a question here. It's been a long night, and I just want to say, I want to thank each and every one of you, the DEP for coming, the Air Guard, and all the city employees here, who I know many of them have worked long, hard hours trying to get a handle on this situation. This little forum here tonight has been long overdue. I'm glad we finally did it, better late than never. But it just means that there's a lot of people out here by the number of people that you see in the room here, and I'm glad we're videotaping it so other residents get to see and hear what happened tonight. And I hope everything that you've heard here tonight that you will take home with you and do a thoughtful and thorough, take time to spend on looking at what we can do to help the residents understand and wrap their head around what's going on here. They deserve answers. They deserve to have their concerns taken seriously. Sometimes we want to minimize because if you think you know all of the things that need to be known about this particular kind of contamination, you might not want to address or you don't want to get them worried or concerned. They are worried and concerned. So giving them the information, taking the time to address those concerns is very important because information or knowledge is power. They need to know how to deal with this and how to protect themselves. So I hope the DEP, when you do your research with the private wells and you find out information, that you not only address the residents that you are testing their wells, is to share that information with everybody that is on private wells. I've been very concerned about the people on private wells for a long time here because we've taken care of the people on city water by shutting those other wells down, but the people on private wells are still accessing the water that's the aquifer that was contaminated. So you may be reassuring the people that you're testing, but it'd be nice to share that information with everybody that isn't being tested right away on phase 1. And I know, having been at BAPAC meetings, because I'm a liaison also to the Barnes Aquifer Protection Advisory Committee, is that they spent some time talking to you at one of their meetings, and then later on at another one of their meetings, took a map and took 5 different locations in the city. Some of them were not even in Westfield. They were like on the borderline of Holyoke in Westfield or Southampton in Westfield. And their suggestion was to test those wells. They were only suggesting 3 in each one of those areas, so you're doing many more than they originally requested. I haven't looked at your map there, so in the plan that you're doing now is phase 1. Whatever you find there, you may or may not, based on the results, branch out to some of those other areas. Are you going to consider those other areas that BAPAC suggested? Because this is why they did it, is because they also were not convinced that water flowing north to south, that there wasn't a possibility that some of those other wells in those other areas got contaminated.
Yes, so and that's why we did go north, and we did go up gradient, and we did choose some wells, just to make sure, and they did put out that recommendation, but again, to be protective, we're looking uphill as well. And if it is found there, then we would expand that potentially even further north.
Okay, that's good to know, and I hope you share all that information. I don't know if at the website, the city website, you could put a link for where you're going to share that information, the presentation you did today. We have a website, they've been loading in information, as Heather mentioned. that there's a bunch of documents that go back a couple of years here. So if there could be a link that people could quickly connect to and get information from you.
That's a great idea, we'll work with the city to
Okay,
do that.
because, and we can keep reminding residents that there is a website to go to. They're obviously looking, but they might not always be looking in the right place. So the stuff is there, they just need to be getting this information on a regular basis rather than wondering what's going on. So thank you very much. I appreciate the fact that you're here, and thank you for having this. Let's have some more. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Mary. Sometimes when you have meetings like this too early, you're not getting the answers we really want to get to you. So it takes a little time just to get the data and figure out the plan of action. So hopefully we did answer as many questions, and I know there was a couple that said we can't answer it, we got to figure that out, we'll get you that information. So do pay attention to the websites. We just about talking about how we can link to the DEP so that we, the results and things are, click away and things like that. We will be sending out more information. We will, I'm sure we'll be having another meeting like this down the road, but stay informed, and if you don't hear or you don't see the information that you want, we all are here to answer the questions. We're not shying away whatsoever from that, and that's why you see us all together, because we're all going to give you the same information, because that's how we're going to split it. So I appreciate everybody coming out. The plan is there. Ask the questions, stay informed, and we appreciate you coming out. Thank you to everybody.